Hello out there. Can everybody hear me who has joined? Hi, Sharon. Perfect, thank you. And you can see me okay? Hello, Jessica from Cold Lake. Hi, Rach. Okay, excellent. I think I'm just gonna wait a few seconds so everyone can get logged on. We have quite a small group this afternoon. Hopefully some people will, maybe log on a little bit later, and that's okay. Small but mighty, exactly. Sunny and Wainwright. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, actually, it looks like the sun might be trying to peek through in Kingston today, which is nice. Okay, well, it is 1:01, and I am going to get started now. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I am really excited about this. I think it's pretty cool that we continue to be able to support and to stay connected with the CAF community by providing some education and awareness around the area of health promotion. So I'm really excited to be able to participate in my first live webinar. So thank you for joining me, and I hope that you can get some significant takeaways today over the next 45 to an hour. So what I'm going to do is throughout the duration of the webinar, I am going to turn off my webcam just so I can make the presentation slides, excuse me, a little bit larger. And then I will return at the end of the presentation to say hello again and to answer any questions that you may have. So just a little introduction first before I turn off my video. My name is Jackie Lesarge, and I am a health promotion specialist here at CFB Kingston. And I will be speaking to you around the topic of alcohol and having some awareness around perhaps your own alcohol consumption and putting into place perhaps some harm reduction in regards to some of your own alcohol and or drinking patterns. So I am going to turn off my webcam now. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to review a few important items. The presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of DND. So any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is forbidden, so please do not take photos or record any component of the presentation. Some of the topics discussed in the webinar may be of a sensitive nature, so if you do have some kiddos running around, we do ask for parental discretion. Please understand that people's stories are theirs alone to tell, and that anything that is shared by participants today in this webinar is not to be discussed outside of the webinar. So let's try to maintain that safety and that confidentiality. So what is said here stays here, but of course, what we learn here can leave here. So this webinar is being recorded, which is wonderful because it does allow the opportunity for you to view it later on our national website at cafconnection.ca. And you can also encourage your peers and your friends to check out previous health promotion webinars that have been going on over the last few weeks. So I do encourage participation throughout the webinar. I will have a few chat discussions in the chat box on the right side of the screen, and I do have a few polls that I am going to put out there as well. So I invite you to participate if you feel comfortable. However, you can just simply sit back, relax, and listen away if that's the way you prefer it. So let's get into it. I will do my best, just to note, to keep an eye on the chat box throughout the presentation and answer any questions that may come up throughout. Bear with me, but I will try my best. And if I, for some reason, miss out on a question or a concern or comment, please, at the end, hopefully we can revisit that. I just want to recognize that some of you out of this small group may not be familiar with health promotion, maybe what our role is or how we support the Canadian Armed Forces. So I just wanted to do a very brief overview of what our actual mandate is and how we do offer that support. So health promotion, our main role is to help CAF members and their family members maintain control over their own health and well-being. And we are there to focus more on that prevention, education, and awareness in 4 main subject areas, and they are listed on the slide here: addiction awareness and prevention, nutritional wellness, social wellness, and active living and injury prevention. And you can see there are a variety of workshops and programs that we have listed here. Today, you will be getting a snippet of our alcohol, other drugs, gambling, and gaming supervisor training, which is a 2-day workshop. And that falls under our addiction awareness and prevention pillar. So all of our courses are free for all family members and CAF members. And I just also wanted to point out as well, while we're on this slide, is that I am a health promotion specialist. And in health promotion, we do focus mainly on prevention. We are not clinical, we don't do treatment, we don't do counseling. So if there is a question or a concern that may be out of my scope or perhaps my expertise and is more well suited for a healthcare professional, then perhaps we can talk more offline and I can help guide you towards that resource to help you better answer that question or concern. Or you may feel more comfortable reaching out to your own local health promotion office to get connected with a resource who can help answer your question. I like to think I know all the answers, but unfortunately I don't. So I hope that's clear for everybody. So just to get things started, I want to know who is in this small little audience we have today. So I am going to just do a quick little poll. So if you want to go to the right side of your screen, I am going to add a poll here, and I welcome you to identify. Just let me find the poll here, sorry. And I would like you to identify who you are. Who is in the audience today? Are you a CAF member? Are you a civilian employee, family member perhaps, or veteran? So it looks like we have a pretty good balance of CAF members and civilian employees. Welcome, family. 12 answers total. Woohoo! We got 12 in the group. That's awesome. So thank you for participating in that. Really appreciate that. So what to expect today? So we are going to talk about alcohol consumption. We're going to explore some of those reasons as to those who choose to drink alcohol. Why? Why do they? Then we'll dive into alcohol and that relationship with stress. Often alcohol is used as a way to cope with some of those daily stressors. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then you'll have an opportunity to do a little self-reflection on your own drinking patterns. And then we'll dive into harm reduction and the low-risk drinking guidelines. In health promotion, we do not preach abstinence from drinking. We don't say do not drink alcohol. Rather, we take the approach where we educate others on some of those strategies in which you can lower your risk associated with alcohol consumption, lower that long-term health risk. So we are going to go into some of those strategies and explore those low-risk drinking guidelines. Then we will talk about alcohol and the impact on your health. I'll provide some fun mocktail recipes for you. And then lastly, we will get into the resources. And of course, a Q&A at the end. I will do my best to leave some time for that as well. So let's start things off with a question. So I do invite you in your chat box to identify some of those reasons why people drink. Why would someone choose to have an alcoholic beverage? To relax, Rachel says to celebrate, of course, those special occasions like a birthday, a promotion, a wedding. A reward after a task is done, for sure. Boredom, absolutely, especially during these times. To relax, play guitar better, Sharon says. Yeah, definitely, because alcohol does that to us, right? Where we just, it helps us relax a little bit, it boosts our self-confidence a little bit, right? It tastes good, absolutely. So essentially, people choose to drink because in some ways it changes the way they feel, whether they want to feel better, whether they want to forget something that perhaps happened to them that day, to be accepted. At times, peer pressure comes into play when it comes to drinking in specific situations and being around certain people. It tastes good, to relax is a big one, to sleep better. For some, they feel that alcohol helps them sleep better, or to dance better, of course, right? Some of us need or want that alcohol so we can show off our dance moves. So there are a variety of reasons why people choose to drink, and those reasons do vary depending on the individual and the situation that they are in. So I don't know about any of you, but I have noticed quite an influx of quarantine memes and photos on social media surrounding alcohol. So I just included these examples as they are somewhat a reflection of what is happening in our world right now. Stress levels are increasing, our boredom levels are increasing for many people. And in some ways, this messaging does make light of the fact that some people may be increasing their consumption of alcohol due to this very unfortunate, stressful, strange, and scary time. So I do encourage everyone out there to really monitor your alcohol consumption at this time. I mean, it's okay to have a little laugh because it can be very relatable and it's a way of connecting, but just being very mindful about the amount that you're consuming, the amount your loved ones are consuming, and assure you're adopting other strategies and other coping strategies to keep you busy. And we will talk more about ways in which you can better monitor some of your drinking patterns at this time. So I just wanted to review some definitions that we may use to describe one's drinking pattern. The first one there at the top, social drinker. Social drinker, there is no concrete definition. It essentially refers to somebody who drinks socially, somebody who can have a few drinks in a social setting, whether it be at a wedding or a birthday party or some kind of social gathering, and is in full control of their drinking patterns, follows the low risk drinking guidelines often. Then we go into the problem drinker, and this is individuals who drink above the safe limit most of the time and may have one or more alcohol-related problem associated with their alcohol consumption. Some of those problems may include perhaps a DUI, maybe a physical or verbal altercation, maybe being hung over more often than not. But problem drinkers do not necessarily meet that criteria for alcohol dependency. And then lastly, alcoholic. Now, this is a term that has multiple and sometimes conflicting definitions. It's commonly described as persistent use of alcohol despite those negative consequences. And other definitions that are included with that is being described as consistent heavy alcohol use, including dependence, needing alcohol to function, and experiencing symptoms of withdrawal and high tolerance. According to the CAF Healthy Lifestyle and Information Survey, it was reported that 94% of CAF members drink alcohol, and 19% consume a harmful amount of alcohol. So drinking past that safe limit of alcohol. Alcohol is the #1 drug of choice for CAF personnel and as well as the general population. Are we surprised by these numbers? would it be appropriate to say that there is a culture surrounding alcohol within the Canadian Armed Forces? No. No. It's very interesting when having conversations and discussions surrounding alcohol in the Canadian Armed Forces with members during, a variety of workshops. And it has been expressed that yes, alcohol is a part of the CAF culture. Absolutely. There's a number of traditions that involve alcohol, including promotions, mess dinners, TGITs, TGIFs, beer calls. These traditions are vocalized by CAF members where alcohol is there, alcohol is present, and there are many CAF members do participate. However, there's another side to that discussion where we are seeing a shift in that culture. There is some change happening in regards to alcohol consumption in CAF members. No longer is there as much pressure for CAF members to participate in some of these traditions with an alcoholic beverage. There's more options for CAF members to participate without alcohol or consuming a non-alcoholic beverage. So throughout these conversations, you are seeing a change in culture surrounding alcohol use, which is good to see. Not saying it still doesn't exist, not saying that some pressure isn't still there, but we do see some change happening, which is a good thing. So based on workplace research in Canada, it has been discovered that environmental stress is linked to twice as many substance use problems. And according to the Healthy Lifestyle and Information Survey, 49% of CAF members attributed their stress to a work or school environment. So unfortunately, members who are experiencing mental distress of some kind often turn to alcohol and other drugs to self-medicate and cope with their problems. So this slide is quite powerful in the sense that chronic stress can be quite harmful to our health, both mentally, physically, to our relationships, and often individuals are leaning on alcohol to cope with some of these stressors. So one of these costs of using alcohol to cope can be job performance. It has been shown that productivity can decrease up to 25% under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And that's largely due to presenteeism. So presenteeism is a term that describes an individual as being physically there, being physically present at work, however, not being mentally there, not being able to focus, having a lack of concentration, having a lack of motivation and drive to perform well at their job. And a lot of this is largely due to perhaps being hungover or having a preoccupation with when am I going to have my next drink. So with this decrease in productivity, this increase in presenteeism, job performance declines. It impacts that unit cohesion, perhaps amongst team members. Operational readiness can negatively be impacted, and it can snowball. So it does pose a health and safety risk within the workplace, not only to the individual under the influence, but also to others. And I just wanted to quickly show this slide just to be familiar with some of those physical, emotional, and behavioral warning signs of potential substance use. So there are some physical signs: weight loss, fatigue, emotional signs such as being irritable, having mood swings, perhaps bouts of anger. Then we have some of those behavioral signs as well. Seeing a change in someone's personal appearance, coming to work, not taking care of themselves, poor hygiene. So these are signs that you can look out for. And if you start to see some of these warning signs, it is a prompt to perhaps offer that support and look into it further. However, it is important to note as well that these signs could be attributed to some other underlying health condition as well. But it is important important, again, seeing these signs indicates some type of behavior change that does indicate it's a red flag. Maybe I need to offer some support at this point. So now I'd like to provide you with the opportunity to self-reflect on your own drinking patterns. So if you feel comfortable, I'm going to throw up some poll questions, and I'd like you to do your own little self-assessment here. So the first poll I am going to add is, I got to find it here. When you think about your drinking patterns, how many drinks containing alcohol do you have on a typical day, do you think? Okay, so majority of you don't drink on a typical day any alcohol. We have some of you 1 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 9, so a good balance there. Okay. Now I'm going to go a little further into the assessment here, and I want you to think about during a typical week and how many drinks containing alcohol would you have during a typical week? Okay, so 2 to 3 seems to be the majority. And we have some of you at 16 plus. So moving forward, and sometimes when we do polls like this, we don't realize, or we don't really think about it until we actually think about it and realize how much we may be consuming. So as we move forward with this presentation, maybe taking some of these harm reduction strategies or approaches may help you better monitor, or perhaps it is an indication that maybe additional support may be something that you could look into as well. So let us go to one more poll here. Now I want you to think about how many drinks you might normally consume on one occasion. In one sitting, typically how many drinks would you consume? All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for participating in that. And as I said, sometimes you don't really recognize how much you might be drinking until you actually sit down and self-reflect a little bit. So let's continue on then and go into and perhaps applying our own drinking patterns to and using a harm reduction strategy to perhaps monitor it better or work on decreasing some of our alcohol consumption. So I want to just test your knowledge in regard to the low risk drinking guidelines. And do you know what they are? Are you familiar with what those low risk drinking guidelines are? So I do have a poll for this. As you can see on the slide, you do have options for what the low risk drinking guidelines are. And I'm going to invite you to go to the poll just to select which letter you believe those low risk drinking guidelines are, or what the maximum standard drinks per day amounts for men and women are, to speak specifically to that question. So far, you're doing great. That's awesome. Okay, so the majority of you selected B. Wonderful, great job. So the recommended guidelines for low risk drinking to reduce those long-term health risks are 0 to 2 standard drinks per day for women and 3 standard drinks for men. no more than 10 standard drinks per week for women, and 15 for men. So just something to keep in mind with these guidelines. They are not targets, they are limits. So if you're currently not drinking 2 drinks a day or 3 drinks a day, please don't start. And it's really important too to recognize that those 10 and 15 standard drinks do not mean that you can save them up for a Friday or Saturday night at the club or a pub, because that could relate to that problem drinking definition, where the more you drink, the more problems may arise. So you want to be mindful of that. And that also constitutes binge drinking, which binge drinking essentially refers to 3 or more drinks in one sitting, or a virtual party. That's right, Tracy. And that is something that is definitely more common now. I know I have a virtual party once a week with my girlfriends. However, we have been really good at not always including alcohol with some of those virtual parties. So we have done other things as well, and doing a smoothie or a cup of tea and things like that. So, but yeah, you're right. We are definitely having those virtual parties and indulging in some alcohol for sure. So something to be mindful of. It's also important too to understand with these low risk drinking guidelines is to ensure that you're also having non-drinking days to minimize that habit formation and minimize that tolerance as well. And low risk does not mean no risk either. So something to keep in mind. So this is not a standard drink size. The low risk drinking guidelines speak to standard drink sizes. For this gentleman here, this may be a standard drink for him, but when we talk of harm reduction, that is not the size we are talking about. So is anybody familiar with what those standard drink sizes are? For wine, beer, and hard liquor specifically, when we talk about standard drink sizes. Does anybody in the chat room want to guess? I know some of you out there know. Alan said 1.5 ounces of hard liquor. Alan, you are correct. 16 ounces for beer. A little bit less than that for beer. 12 ounces for beer. Correct. You got it. Great job. Thanks for participating there. So for beer, 6 ounces of wine. No, it's actually 5 ounces for wine. And often you will find in some restaurants and pubs, they do not even provide a 5 ounce option. It's either a 6 ounce or a 9 ounce or a 10 ounce. I've noticed that in some pubs and restaurants, but for wine it is 5 ounces, 12% alcohol content, and yes, beer is 12 ounces. So really being mindful of those standard drink sizes. Your current standard drink of wine or beer might not necessarily be up to par with these standard drink sizes. So again, something to keep in mind when you are pouring that next drink. So what I do have for you right now, just to provide some additional resources for you, this resource goes into a little bit more detail into these guidelines and does offer some other safety tips surrounding alcohol consumption. And it is from the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a link here that you can download. And it provides you with Canada's low risk drinking guidelines. And it, again, as I said, it also provides you with much more information as a resource for you. And I actually found another great site called rethinkyourdrink.ca. And this is actually another great resource that you can access. And Rethink Your Drink is an awareness campaign that it basically encourages moderation and low-risk drinking to support a healthy lifestyle. And it's a very interactive site with a lot of really informative videos and information. So I invite you to check that out as well. Wonderful resource. Okay. And did you know that the red Solo cup is also another way in which you can monitor how much you are drinking? So the Solo cup is very popular in social gatherings to hold your alcoholic beverage, or non-alcoholic, of course. But it does outline via the lines and indentations on the cup, it outlines the standard drink sizes for hard liquor, wine, and beer on the Solo cup. So another strategy perhaps to utilize if you are at a social gathering and you're really trying to monitor how much you are consuming, using a red Solo cup can be a way to do that. I never knew that either, Jessica, until a few months ago. So I thought that was a pretty cool FYI for sure. So a couple questions for you. At what blood alcohol content is one considered impaired? So I invite you to use the chat box to take a guess. Anyone? You got it. Thank you, Alan, Bruce. Okay, wonderful. So the maximum legal blood concentration is 80 milligrams of alcohol in 100 milliliters of blood, or 0.08. Okay, so what are some signs you may see in an individual who is impaired? Slurred speech. Absolutely. Slurred speech or talking more often than not. Trouble walking, so perhaps a little uncoordinated, off balance. They're getting better at guitar, bad jokes, bloodshot eyes. Yeah, definitely. All potential signs that someone has had a little bit too much to drink, and we've probably witnessed getting sick. Yeah, we've probably, each of us, we have witnessed someone getting to that point where they are spilling drinks and they are, you know, telling all these bad jokes and unfortunately getting to the point where they are vomiting. Absolutely. So one thing that I did want to provide for you, this is a great visual, and it basically gives you a better understanding of alcohol's pathway through the brain and the abilities and the capacities that are impacted and impaired along the way. So as soon as you take your first drink, your reason, your caution, your memory, and your intelligence is impaired immediately. And then if you decide to have another drink or two, self-control and judgment becomes impaired. Then you decide to perhaps, go to a friend's house or go to a pub and have a few more drinks. That's when your senses start to become impaired. Then you decide to continue drinking because your judgment at this point is very much impaired, so you continue to have more drinks, and that's when some of those visible signs come into play that you had mentioned: coordination, balance, bad jokes, spilling drinks, and eventually those vital centers are impacted if you continue to drink, where you may start getting sick to your stomach, or you may pass out. So blood alcohol concentration, your levels are really high at the point when you do start seeing those more visible signs of intoxication. But when we look at that reason and that caution and that memory and that intelligence, are those important abilities to have in the workplace or at school? Yes, absolutely. right? So one drink can significantly impair some of those capacities. So definitely something to think about. Number 6 again. So number 6 was your vital centers. So that's when alcohol starts to impair some of those vital centers, which cause perhaps you to start feeling sick and vomiting or get to the point where you pass out. So it's when your blood alcohol concentration is at that level where your vital centers are overwhelmed and your body starts to reject that alcohol that you are intaking. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. So we have all perhaps been around someone who has had too much to drink, or maybe, personally, we've had our own experiences with drinking too much. So I'd like to do another poll here, and I'd like to ask you, what is the best way to sober someone up? So I'm going to share that poll with you now. What do you think? So do you make them a coffee, throw them in the shower, maybe you wait it out and keep an eye on them, or perhaps give them food, specifically bread? All right, so it looks like giving them food, waiting it out, throw them in the shower are some options that have been shown here. Okay, thank you for that. So at the end of the day, time is what an individual needs to sober up. Coffee will not work. Cold shower will not work. There's no special concoction or mix that's going to sober someone up right away. Giving food, specifically bread, is a very common way to think about sobering someone up. It's funny, I just watched a show the other day where someone was intoxicated and their friend gave them a loaf of bread to start consuming to sober them up. However, that could be mixed up with the fact that if you do choose to drink alcohol, make sure that you do eat while you are consuming alcohol. You do not want to, consume alcohol on an empty stomach. So the idea is to make sure that you're eating while you're drinking. So it does take 1 to 3 hours on average to metabolize one standard drink. So that's why time is vital. And time is the only thing that will work for that alcohol to metabolize completely out of your body. And that rate in which alcohol is metabolized is different for different people. So it's something to keep in mind too. If you are out drinking, you're at a birthday party and you're out drinking with friends perhaps, and you're out at a club till maybe 3, 4 in the morning, you have to work the next day at 8. So that 2 or 3 hours of sleep you have in between, that shower you have in the morning, there is still risk when driving to work the next day. You are more than likely still significantly impaired, and that does pose a risk to not only yourself but others as well. So being mindful of that piece, just a couple hours sleep is not going to do it. You do need to give time. So, question now in regards to driving under the influence. So I've got another poll question here for you. And I'd just like to test your knowledge on this one as well. On average, what do you think is the financial cost for one DUI? Okay, so it looks like there's quite a good balance between the 8,000 and the 23,000. But I can tell you that the answer is, on average, $23,000 is the minimum amount you would pay for one DUI. So that would include things like any type of fines, criminal fines associated with the DUI, increase in insurance costs, paying and installing the ignition interlock system into your car. You're responsible for payment for that, as well as the maintenance of that. Any court costs or legal costs come into play as well. So $23,000 at minimum, up to $31,000 potentially. That doesn't look, that $30 cab ride doesn't look so bad when you see these numbers that could cost an individual. Financially, there's other costs obviously associated with driving under the influence, but financially, $23,000 is quite a lot of money. When we look at alcohol in energy drinks, I'm sure maybe some of us here have consumed an alcohol beverage mixed with an energy drink. However, there has been some research, specifically within the States at a university there, and it was found that students who mix energy drinks with alcohol were twice as likely to be injured during a bout of drinking, to need medical attention of some sort, or to make the choice to ride with a drunk driver, or make the choice to drive drunk themselves. And many researchers believe that the high caffeine levels in these energy drinks masks the effects of alcohol, such as the stumbling and the slurred speech, and the sleepiness that signals that intoxication. So you're drunk, but you just don't know that you're drunk. So they call that the wide awake drunk. So being mindful of when you are consuming alcohol and having that mix of alcohol and energy drinks, the caffeine being a stimulant, the alcohol being a depressant, it really disrupts the nervous system a little bit there. So it can potentially cause more problems. And this visual here we call our Molson Man. So we show this just because it does speak to some of the health implications in regards to alcohol use and weight gain. Because alcohol does have calories. There's 7 calories per gram of alcohol, so it does contribute to your caloric intake. And simply following the low-risk drinking guidelines, it can contribute to 21 to 31 pounds of weight gain per year. And then with weight gain, there are other health implications that do come into play, such as obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. So being mindful of that component of alcohol consumption on your health is important as well. So I'm sure many of you may be familiar with the mental health continuum model. It has been introduced in previous health promotion webinars, and military members, I'm sure, are familiar at this point with the model. But just to give you a little overview of it, it is a tool. It was created by the military for the military, and it is used to help individuals identify some of those behavior changes, either in themselves or in others close to them, that may indicate someone may be in distress. So it is important when using this model to know what yourself and what others close to you look like when they are in a healthy state, that being the green in the far left of the continuum. Recognize what someone looks like when they're doing okay, because then you're able to better recognize when someone may be slipping further along the right, towards the right of the continuum, into the yellow, into the orange, or red. So this is a really helpful tool to identify some of those behavior changes. And this model does speak to changes in mood, attitude, sleep, physical health, social health, and I have circled at the bottom the addictive behavior component. So when we look at the mental health continuum in relation to addiction issues, it helps to be familiar with some of those behavior changes. Again, either in yourself or of someone else. So we can help guide or help or connect them to a resource to get them better. And identifying early is key, right? So when it comes to addiction issues, being in the green really relates to that social drinker. Most people can drink alcohol and not encounter problems and just be social and follow the low risk drinking guidelines. So essentially that's what someone looks like in the green. If someone begins to slip into the yellow, it might look like alcohol use is a little bit more regular. Maybe it's being utilized as a way to cope more often. How many times have you heard someone say, or maybe even yourself say, oh, I've had such a bad day, I need a drink. Maybe that is being said more often. You're hearing that more often than not. Perhaps they're spending more money on alcohol. And then in the orange, use starts to increase even more. It starts to become harder to control. Perhaps the alcohol use is now having an impact on one's work life. Perhaps relationships are being impacted by the alcohol use. And then when we go into the red, that is when alcohol use becomes a little bit harder to control. There's more of a dependency, and there's more severe consequences that are associated with someone consuming alcohol in the red. And the idea is to prevent someone from getting to that point, from getting to the red. So recognizing some of these behavior changes early and intervening at that point and offering that support, having a conversation about it so those individuals can get back to that healthy state. Because once you are in the red or someone is in the red, it makes it much more challenging to get back to that healthy state of living. And another thing I did want to point out too about the mental health continuum model is that it is not a diagnostic tool. So it is not there for us to diagnose anybody with having an addiction issue or any type of mental health issue. It is simply a tool. It's a guide to help us look out for each other essentially and be able to have that conversation and support each other when we're stressed out. So there are some CAF policies out there related to alcohol and drug use within the Canadian Armed Forces. And I really see CAF policies as a protective factor. They are in place to help leaders within the Canadian Armed Forces to look out for their peers, for their subordinates. It can be a really powerful component in the process of supporting someone who may be struggling with alcohol misuse. So it is important as CAF members to be familiar with some of these policies surrounding alcohol misconduct, drugs, and if you do supervise civilian, there's also a policy that supports civilian conduct and discipline as well. Now, let's talk about how you can still cheers during those virtual parties and your social dates with friends and family with a tasty beverage. Maybe it can be in a fancy glass. You can have some mocktails. So they are extremely tasty. I have had a few mocktails of my own and they don't have the alcohol. So a strategy you could use if you're trying to monitor or decrease your alcohol consumption, but you still want to be social and you still want to have those virtual parties with your friends and family, perhaps making an fun event out of it by choosing to make some mocktails over cocktails. That could be a way to really help with reducing that alcohol consumption, but at the same time still having fun. It can potentially be a family event with the mocktails. So Strengthening the Forces has created a mocktail recipe book, and it does contain several tasty. I've tried the sparkling sangria. I've also tried, there's a holiday punch one in there as well. Very tasty, fun mocktails. We had one at our Christmas party get together. Here locally, provides nutrition information for each mocktail. So if you are being more mindful about your nutrition and your eating patterns and things like that, it does speak to that component as well. So I have provided you with the mocktail guide here. So I'm going to share that with you. So feel free to download it. Hope this works. So this is again from Strengthening the Forces, and it provides some really fun mocktails that you can enjoy with friends and family. And you can still do that cheers during those virtual parties, because those are so big right now, and they're so important right now to be a part of and to participate in. Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. And then lastly, I just wanted to review some resources with you. So, you know, we're going through a time right now where, you know, there's that fear of the unknown. You know, some of us may be struggling more than others. Some of us are able to keep it together more than others, or may think we're keeping it together. But it's okay to reach out. And, you know, these resources are put in place because they want to help, and they are there to help you during this really tough time that we're all going through. So when we look at some of those resources, the Canadian Forces Member Assistance Program is a really valuable resource for CAF members and family members. It's a 24/7 confidential short-term counseling program. I have used the civilian employee version of CIFMAP, and I've had great experiences with that, because there is a civilian one as well. Then there's also the Kids Help Phone is one that I want to point out, which now has a text messaging service, which is really helpful. And another thing, just in relation to alcohol awareness, your base addictions counselor is another resource that you could always reach out to as well locally. And again, utilize those services that are available to you locally at your base hospital, because again, they are there to support you, right? That's why they're there. So don't be afraid to reach out, because it is tough. It's a tough time right now. Mocktails can look just as fancy as a drink with alcohol in it, and no one knows any different. Exactly. Awesome. All right. Being a part of the webinar today, and I really, you know, are there any questions, anything, any concerns, any thoughts that you wanted to express before we head out this afternoon? I just want to say, as Jessica, you pointed out, yes, stay safe, stay healthy. Cheers to drinking responsibly. Don't be afraid to reach out if you are struggling. And because we all are, some on different levels than other. But I really appreciate you spending your afternoon with me, and see you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Krista. Thanks, Tracy.